So, as I say, my name's Tanya Lee, work with Culture Works Consortium. I'm a coach and I'm an ICF accredited coach supervisor, soon to take my diploma to be accredited with the EMCC, both as a coach supervisor and a senior coach practitioner. I'd like to introduce you to Mike Clark from the Coaching Bridge, who is also my supervisor and has been for a long time. He's still with us, he's still smiling, and he also runs a program, both of the programs, to accredit you as a coach supervisor. So Mike, let me just hand over to you to give a little bit of an intro about yourself.
Yeah, well, good morning, Tanya. Thank you very much, and really delighted to be here with you and with our audience today. Yeah, I'm really passionate about this thing called coaching supervision, as you can see from the slide. Yeah, I came into supervision. Well, I've always had supervision since I've been qualified as an executive coach for about the last 15, 20 years. And now, really, my view about supervision is really important for coaches to look at their practice, to look at how they go about their coaching work, and also for them to develop their authenticity as coaches in this big wide world of coaching that both you and I are in at the moment. It's a very competitive market, and you really need to stand out as a coach if you're going to make a difference. And of course, doing it for the benefit of your clients too, not just for yourself as a coach. So I've been in supervision now for at least 10 years. And as you say, I run programs now to qualify coach supervisors across the world.
Brilliant. Thanks, Mike. So I've been working coaching officially for 5 years, but for longer in my role within corporate. But when I first qualified as a coach and I started to look at coach supervision, I definitely didn't know what it was. Or why I should have it. And I think I'd got in my head supervision when it's someone coming in, to sit in with my one-to-one coaching session and watch me and then tell me what I've done right and what I've done wrong. And I think for me, that's what I understood the word supervision to mean. And absolutely, it's nothing like that. But it'd be great, Mike, if you could just talk about where that word comes from and how it's morphed into something very different, which is the supervision word.
Yeah, and I think really the history, I agree with you completely about the word in the description, because I felt that too when I started my supervision work and having a supervisor. And what's all this about? Yeah, and I think the word comes from the history around counselling and on the practice around medical and making sure that whatever you do in that particular part of the world that you work in, that you're doing things ethically, with the right approach, and you're being checked up on, I suppose, from a practice point of view, making sure that you're doing things the right way. And I think that's really where it started. That as a counsellor or as a professional, you needed some form of quality checking and ethical checking. I think over the last 20, 30 years, it's now been used much more now to look at coaches and the work that they do, and not necessarily supervise what they're doing, but to look at them as a complete person and encourage them to reflect more on what they do, to continually develop what they do, and to provide support and enable them to be even better than what they are at the moment. I describe coaching supervision as having a safe place, a safe container for a coach when they come, to talk to somebody who they trust, a very professional person. So I think it's really important that the supervisor is properly trained and accredited like you are, rather than having someone who you meet for a cup of coffee and just having a chat. So I think it's important you work with somebody professionally and properly accredited to do that.
Yeah, I can't agree more, Mike. I've really reaped the benefits from coach supervision, from understanding myself as a coach and what I bring to the coaching and what else I might bring in that isn't useful or helpful. But also that, that also helps my clients to move forward. So I'm becoming a better coach doing that. But absolutely, that word supervision, I don't think it gives me a bit of a visceral feeling of, well, someone's watching me and telling me. And my experience coach supervision is not that. And I know when I was working with you within the coach supervision area, as group supervision, we started to talk about how do we change that view of those words? And we had lots of conversations, right? So talk to me about how coach supervision came around, because everyone will see it on the screen now and thinking, wow, that's not what I'd normally see when we talk about coaching supervision.
Yeah, I think it's because it's about the coach as the person, and supporting the coach in their reflective practice. And to do that, the coach gains supervision about themselves. So they do a tour of themselves effectively. I mean, they create much more self-awareness by doing that, and also develop their confidence. And one thing we forget about sometimes as a person is we forget about our strengths. And with supervision, a coach can start understanding more positively about what they do and the benefits that they bring to their coaching clients and to their clients' organizations. So the word supervision gives the coach a different look at themselves, really, and a much more rounded tour of what they do and themselves as a person.
Yeah, it's that vision of floating above yourself, Mike, and seeing the whole of yourself, as you say, as a coach within that space. And how do you remain ethical, professional, and at service for what you're trying to do?
Yeah, certainly. The ethical side of it, which is what I said, that was part of the history of supervision. That's still fundamentally important to a coach these days, of course, and supervision does cover that and include that. The other part about the word is I work with coaches who are becoming supervisors in different parts of the world, and the term supervision, particularly in certain cultures, means it's a much more instructive word, much more authoritative word, and it doesn't work. But by breaking it down into super and vision, it has much more meaning and relevance when we talk about it.
Yeah. So, I think for people who've never had coaching supervision, there are several ways you can do this. I've been part of a group supervision with other coaches, which was facilitated by Mike and Judith, one of his colleagues. And I've also had one-to-one coaching supervision with Mike. And, Mike goes back to that trust part of it. If you're a coach, you know the importance of building trust, because sometimes we share stuff that is really personal with our coach supervision. I have very high trust with Mike. But what I love about Mike's style is he's a lot of fun and really creative. And one of the things that I've really taken out of coach supervision is finding my creativity again. So how do we do that as coaches? Because when we are trained as coaches, we don't always see that fun. We have sometimes that throwback to the corporate world that we've all worked in. So Mike, I'd love you to talk about some of your creativity. I've had Mike lying down under a sculpture in one of our coaching supervision sessions when we were looking at things from different perspectives. I didn't get on the floor myself purely because I'd never have got up again. But Mike, it'd be great to understand how you use creativity within supervision.
Yeah, thank you. You've also been a very willing participant, Tanya, too. So, I think when we first met and I started talking to you about using different approaches, you said, "Oh, I'm not creative. I can't do drawing." But of course, when you tried it out, you found that actually it wasn't about the drawing quality. It was actually about giving what you were thinking some different meaning. So I found it as a way I mean, I've always done in my coaching work very creative approach. I've been outdoors most of the time, or I've been walking somewhere, or I've been going to an art gallery or museum for my coaching session. So I thought I'd try and bring that into supervision too. And obviously with the pandemic and when we had lockdown, I couldn't do that anymore. So I had to find a way of bringing creativity online. And so there are ways you can do it. You can, encourage your coach, your supervisee to start drawing and creating images about the situation that they're in. And then you can go further with it and, develop this thing called constellations, where you use objects in front of you to display what it is that you're actually talking about, and providing this kind of image rather than words, so to speak. So I find it a really, really different approach, particularly if the coach is stuck. If they can't find a way forward with their coaching client, you just look at it from a different perspective. And I think me lying down in that gallery was about, as you say, looking at things differently.
Yeah. And I think for me, one of the things that I learned about supervision is not just about talking about when you're stuck with a client or when you feel you're transferring some of what you have experienced or felt. How do I stop that reflexive rather than just reflective, looking at yourselves? And we talk a lot about reflection, but I don't think as many people talk about the reflexive practice.
No, you're right, I think, yeah.
It's definitely something that, I've really brought with me as a coach to have supervision, is bringing that reflexive practice in. Mike, can you just explain what you understand as reflexive being? Because for me, it's looking at what I'm bringing into the room with me, not just that reflection. It's looking at me as a whole that we've talked about.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of writing being done now about reflexivity. It's becoming very, very topical as a theme in coaching and supervision. I mean, for me, simply, and you use the word visceral approach. For me, it's about, taking something into your head and then taking it further into you, into your body, and getting some form of emotional response to what you're thinking about, whether it's in your gut or your heart, and then that comes back out into your mind. And I think in supervision sessions, there's a way of actually bringing that out, with your trusted supervisor. So for me, it's about taking your reflection further into yourself.
Yeah.
And I think you're really good at doing that, Tanya. I mean, it's not necessarily being an emotional person. It's about, responding to what's going on inside of you.
Yeah. I am sometimes quite emotional though, Mike. We have had tears.
We've had tears for fears. Yes, that's right.
Had those. And I think, for me, doing the coaching supervision qualification allowed me to bring in that reflective and reflexive thoughts, looking at those bigger picture, what is happening in social, cultural, professional context. Things don't happen in isolation. What else are we bringing into the room? What else are our coaches bringing into the room? What is the organization bringing to that room? And how does it impact those conversations we have as coaches?
Yeah, and I think for the supervisor, that's a great place for the conversation to take place, where those kind of themes that you just talked about. And I think the other thing for a supervisor is not to be responsible for outcomes. As a coach, you've got coaching objectives to work with. As a supervisor, the beauty of it is that you let your supervisee, your coach, find their own way with their outcomes. So, again, that's moving away from this supervision word. It becomes much more of a free-flowing space, a bit ambiguous, of course. There isn't necessarily a clear result for each supervision session, but it's up to the supervisee to decide what they want to do with it.
Yeah, absolutely. And you talked a little bit about return on investment. At the beginning, we live in a commercial world. We coaches run businesses. They're in business businesses, organizations that we go into to help support and supervise their coaches run businesses. We live in a commercial world.
Exactly.
So, as well as all the other stuff that we get from it, how would you describe the return on investment for coaching supervision?
Yeah, well, it's about the quality of what the coach then does through having this regular, CPD conversation, the professional development conversation with a trained supervisor. It's the quality of the work. Therefore, the client, the coachee who the coach works with, probably in an organization, will get an enhanced, improved experience, I would hope, and therefore, the impact on the organization would be greater too. I think now that if you're a savvy employer, you're going to be thinking about, if you bring a coach in to work with one of your leaders or future leaders, you're going to be asking, what supervision do you have?
Yeah.
You need to have, a savvy employer, a very experienced HR director or somebody buying in a coach will be asking that now. And if you don't have it, you're going to be losing out in that market.
Yeah. And I think it's really interesting to hear you talking about credentials and supervision now. I think probably 5 years ago, I don't think organizations were really aware of supervision within coaches. Unfortunately, you can label yourself as a coach, regardless of whether you've done any accreditation or training. You can do a 30-minute, you can do nothing and say, I'm a coach.
Yeah.
And ICF, EMCC, Apex, all of the big accreditation bodies within the UK and the world now recognise, and to become a coach with them, you need to have supervision. And I think that's coming into organisations now with that realisation of, actually, we need to start to vet and understand, who does this person have supervision? Because if they do, we're usually getting better outcomes, better coaches. What are your
and I think, I agree with that completely. But in different parts of the world, again, where I said earlier that supervision is still very new and it's not understood so much, where mentoring perhaps is much more widely known for coaches. I think supervision will be another 5 years before it really becomes such an apparent need for a coach to have on a regular basis. But it's getting there. I mean, places like India and the Middle East, where the coaching market is booming, supervision is going to go alongside that, hand in hand. But it's going to take some time. So, Judith, who you mentioned, and Joe in South Africa, another colleague of mine, we're finding we're having to position supervision in a different way. And as I said at the beginning, the word description is one way of doing it, but it's it's not really an open door just yet, because the market isn't so encouraging towards supervision. But as you said, the accrediting bodies, now they're asking for their coaches to have regular supervision is important.
Yeah, and I think as well, that whole conversation, I know I work very closely with, and in my coach supervision training, it was global. We had Lebanon, India, New Zealand. It's been great learning from other cultures as well, and what that looks like. And I think for me, one of the big wins from coach supervision was getting group coach supervision, and also the group coach supervision course allowed me to see things very differently. And I still work with someone, I still have a call very regularly with someone I met on our coach vision course about India, but still very much for them around the mentoring part rather than coaching, and when that's moving into what does that look like. But I think the UK are probably a little bit further ahead than some of the other markets.
Yeah, I think the big opportunity in the UK is with internal coaches, where an organization has a cadre of internal coaches, where supervision is really something that's important for them too, because within an internal coach environment, you have these boundary issues, you have this confidentiality kind of question sometimes, and to bring that to an external coach supervisor is really something that supports the organization again, but also supports their internal coaching program.
Yeah, I think, Mike, talking about that is internal coaches have so many extra pressures on them.
Yeah.
They have that contextual, as you say, the organization, what is the culture within the organization? How well does it receive coaching? Also, that you'll have heard noise about your coachee probably.
Of course.
Before you even met them. So, having those type of things is really, really challenging, because you've already got some context which you perhaps don't want to have. So how do you get that coach supervision? You can't talk to someone within the organization.
No.
Coaching is confidential.
No, you have all this bias potentially, don't you, already going on. You've heard corridor conversations about the person that you're coaching internally, and you may even know their line manager, as a colleague or something. So bringing it to an external place, a safe space to do that too, is really, really important.
Yeah, and I think for me, some of the coach supervision has allowed me to be a bit braver about putting those biases, those boundaries in place, and actually living much more ethically in my world. So what are my ethical dilemmas? And we talk about coach supervision. It is also about that bigger picture of you as your organization, your business, what you're running as your business. It's not just about challenges that you may perceive are happening with your coachee, and the fact you're trying to fix something which maybe is not fixable or is out of your remit, but also what does my business, my organization, what does my brand look like as a coach?
Yeah, that's really important. I think I mentioned at the beginning about authenticity as a coach, and I think bringing that into supervision. Once you go through your training program, you tend to follow a competency framework, and then suddenly you're in this big wide world of, as I said at the beginning too, around the marketplace, and you're being competitive with others, and you need to stand out, you need to be different, and bringing that into supervision too helps you find your way and helps you find your true identity as a coach too.
Yeah, and very much like you have with your coaching clients, you need to have that chemistry meeting with your coaching supervisor.
Of course, yeah.
So building that up as part of that coaching supervision.
Yeah, I find that the trust part, after you've had that type of conversation, I find it can develop very quickly.
Yeah.
And when you then suddenly trust each other very, very easily, the initial contracting about how you're going to work together becomes quite straightforward. And you may even get into these things like creativity and do things a bit different because you have permission together to do that.
Yeah. Yeah, no, as Mike said, my face when Mike said we're going to draw something. Just really. And actually it's opened up a whole new avenue for me, which I wouldn't have had if I hadn't had coach supervision. So learning from my supervisors, but learning also from my fellow coach supervisors and fellow coaches within that supervision world. Mike, if you were to describe coaching supervision in one sentence, could you do that?
Yeah, well, as I look out my window, it's a raining day at the moment. I think it brings some sunshine into a coach's workplace and into what they do. It actually opens up the clouds and creates some brightness. So as I said, you may be stuck, or you may have a difficult coaching relationship, or you may just have anything you'd like to talk about, around what you do as a coach. But with working with a professionally trained supervisor, it can open up the clouds for you.
Yeah.
And you can see things in a different way. you may even be able to see these planets tonight as well too.
Yeah. No, I saw one. Well, I think it was one last night, but because I think it's Friday, isn't it? They all align.
Yeah, and I mentioned constellations, which is a technique you use in supervision, but obviously the planets are aligning later, which will be a constellation too in itself.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, just finally, really, I'm just interested now in creating a legacy for coaching in the future, not just in this country but worldwide. And I think through supervision, if I can train others to become supervisors like yourself, then that can spread the word, and I can be assured that the coaching market in the future will be of a certain high quality. So that's really what I'm interested in doing now, is developing new supervisors, giving them the professional insights and of my experience too, and helping them to spread the good words in different places.
Yeah. Thanks, Mike. We're coming towards the end. So, for me, coach supervision has really helped me become a better coach, and has given me lots of confidence. So I can't recommend coach supervision enough. Coaching can be very lonely. It's a very private, and ethically we need to keep those conversations private, but we can talk about challenges. We can get support from other coaches and coach supervisors to enable us to become our best, and that's your return on investment. The outcomes for our coaches are better, and that's ultimately where we come from, because we are more comfortable in our skin as coaches. So if anyone's listening to this, either now or on replay, please, if you want any further information, either about looking for a coach supervisor or training to be a coach supervisor, you can send a message to CultureWorks Consortium on their website. So that's cultureworks.com, and we will liaise with Mike on that. But thank you for listening, and Mike, thank you for coming and talking to me about it, and I look forward to our next coach supervision session.
It's always a pleasure being with you, Tanya, so thank you very much for the chance to do this. It's been great.
Brilliant. Thank you.